This is the Marxists at the Movies podcast.
Scene opens, white lights dim down low. The cinema whispers where truths can grow. From shadows deep and screens ignite, the proletariat comes alive tonight. Marxists at the movies, bright and raw, breaking through the reels to rewrite the law. Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting the name.
All right, so we're diving into Dallas Buyers Club,
Oh, yeah.
a movie that's gotten a lot of buzz, but maybe not for the reasons you'd think.
Right.
We're going beyond the typical Hollywood hype,
Yeah.
the weight loss,
Yeah.
the Oscars,
Yeah.
all that.
Mhm.
Instead, we're looking at this film through a very specific lens.
Okay.
We've got this fascinating academic critique of the film,
Mm-hmm.
written from a communist perspective.
A communist perspective.
Yeah,
Interesting.
this critique pulls no punches.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they call out Dallas Buyers Club for what it is.
Okay.
A, quote, neoliberal myth of individual salvation,
Wow.
which is a fancy way of saying it reinforces some pretty problematic capitalist ideas.
I see.
But it's not just about the movie itself.
Right.
It's about using Dallas Buyers Club as a way to understand the deeper issues at play,
Okay.
especially how the film tackles, or rather doesn't tackle, the AIDS crisis
Mhm.
and the systemic failures that allowed it to become so devastating.
Right.
And that's where these YouTube videos come in.
Okay.
They give us this broader historical context about the AIDS crisis,
Uh-huh.
which helps us see the film's narrative in a new light.
Interesting.
What's striking is the contrast.
Right.
You have the film focusing on one man's fight for survival,
Right.
Ron Woodruff, played by Matthew McConaughey.
Yes.
But the reality of the AIDS crisis was a collective struggle,
Mm-hmm.
a community fighting for their lives, their rights, their dignity.
Of course.
So let's unpack this critique a bit.
Okay.
Their main argument is that the film focuses on the wrong villain.
Okay.
They're saying it's not really about Ron Woodruff battling the healthcare system.
Right.
It's about the healthcare system itself being the true antagonist.
I see.
They argue that the film, whether intentionally or not, ends up portraying healthcare as just another commodity.
Commodity.
Yeah, something you buy and sell,
Uh-huh.
rather than a fundamental human right.
Right.
And that's a core tenet of capitalist ideology,
Yeah.
profit over people. And you see this play out in the film.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
How so?
the way they depict the FDA,
Uh-huh.
the pharmaceutical companies,
Mm.
even the government,
Right.
they're all more concerned with control and profits than actually helping people who are suffering.
Wow.
It's
Well,
a powerful critique.
Yeah.
And it's backed up by historical facts.
Sure.
When we're talking about the early 80s,
Mm-hmm.
a time when effective treatments for AIDS were scarce.
Uh-huh.
And access was largely determined by who could afford it.
Right.
The system was failing those who needed it most.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
And the film does capture some of that desperation.
Okay.
There's a moment where Woodruff, desperate for treatment,
Mm-hmm.
travels to Mexico to obtain unapproved medication.
Right.
It shows how far people were willing to go to survive when the system was failing them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But the critique challenges us to think about whether the film fully grapples with the implications of that system. Does it go far enough in condemning the forces that created this desperation?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it in some ways normalize them by focusing on a single individual's fight?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And speaking of individual versus collective,
Okay.
this critique really takes issue with how the film portrays Ron Woodruff.
Right.
The film presents him as this rebellious hero,
Uh-huh.
a cowboy fighting the system.
Okay.
And on the surface, that's a compelling narrative.
Sure.
But the critique argues that he's more of a libertarian fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
a symbol of capitalist individualism succeeding within a broken system.
I see.
So he's resourceful, sure,
Yeah.
but he's also profiting from a desperate situation.
Right.
He sets up this underground market
Okay.
the Dallas Buyers Club,
Uh-huh.
selling medications to others with AIDS.
Okay.
And that's where it gets ethically complicated.
Yeah.
On one hand, he's providing access to the treatments that people desperately need,
Mm-hmm.
but on the other hand, he's profiting from a health crisis, exploiting the very system he's supposed to be fighting against.
That's a good point.
It's making me wonder,
Yeah.
is the film celebrating individual grit?
Uh-huh.
Or is it inadvertently endorsing a system that commodifies healthcare
Mm-hmm.
and leaves people with no choice but to fend for themselves?
Right.
That's a question the film doesn't really answer.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what the critique is calling out.
Okay.
They argue that by focusing on Woodruff's individual journey,
Right.
the film ignores the collective efforts of those who were fighting for systemic change.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to those YouTube videos.
Okay.
The biographics video mentions how by 1983,
Yeah.
AIDS had already been reported in every region of the world.
Wow.
This was a global crisis,
Yeah.
not just an American one.
Right.
And the response to the crisis reflected that
Well,
you had groups like Gay Men's Health Crisis and ACTUP, emerging organizations
yeah.
formed by and for the community,
You're right.
providing support and demanding action.
Yeah.
When governments and institutions were failing to do so,
Of course.
it feels like the film is missing this whole other layer of the story.
Yeah.
The collective fight,
Right.
the community organizing, the
Yeah.
activism.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're saying, look at this lone wolf, he's the hero.
Yeah.
But they're ignoring the pack that was out there,
Mm-hmm.
making real change happen.
It's like they took the power of the people and shrunk it down to the size of single man.
Right.
But these groups, like ACTUP,
Yeah.
they understood that change doesn't come from playing by the rules of a broken system.
Right.
They took direct action.
Mm-hmm.
They were disruptive, they were loud,
Mm-hmm.
and they got results.
The Kara Circle video really highlighted that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they weren't just asking politely for change. They were
yeah.
demanding it.
Right.
Protests, die-ins,
Mm-hmm.
even taking over government buildings.
Wow.
They knew how to make their voices heard.
And they were strategic about it.
Okay.
Remember the Silence Death campaign? That iconic pink triangle with the words?
Right.
It was everywhere. They understood the power of symbols and how to get their message across.
They weren't just about slogans, though, right?
Right.
The Kara Circle video talks about some of their major victories.
Okay, like what?
Like, they actually forced the CDC to change its definition of AIDS.
Really?
Yeah, so that women could qualify for benefits and get included in drug trials.
That's huge.
And let's not forget their push for needle exchange programs in New York City.
Oh, right.
That was a big win for harm reduction,
Yeah.
a way to actually prevent the spread of the virus, something that wasn't really on the government's radar at the time.
It's amazing how much they accomplished.
These were real tangible victories.
Yeah.
Lives saved,
Mhm.
systems changed,
Mhm.
and the critique points out that none of this is even hinted at in Dallas Buyers Club.
Wow. That's a pretty glaring omission.
It is.
And it goes back to their point about the film reinforcing this individualistic capitalist worldview. It's like they're saying Ron Woodruff figured it out on his own, so why can't everyone?
But that's not how real change happens, right?
Right.
The biographics video also talked about the early days of the epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just one person finding a solution.
Yeah.
It was communities coming together to care for each other,
Right.
to share information,
Yeah. Huh?
to demand action. Exactly.
Yeah.
They created their own support systems,
Yeah.
their own networks of care,
Right.
because the existing systems were failing them.
Of course.
They didn't wait for permission or approval.
Mm-hmm.
They saw a need and they filled it.
Makes you think.
It does.
What if the film had focused on that collective struggle?
Right.
What if it had shown the power of community organizing, of people coming together to demand change?
Yeah,
Would it have been a different film?
absolutely.
It would have challenged the very foundation of the individualistic narrative that the film seems to embrace. It would have highlighted the power of solidarity, of people recognizing their shared humanity and fighting for a better world together.
And that's a message that resonates even today, right?
Absolutely.
We're facing so many challenges that require collective action.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like
What?
climate change,
Mhm.
economic inequality,
Right.
you name it.
The AIDS crisis was a stark reminder that these issues can't be solved by individuals alone.
Right.
It takes organized effort, it takes solidarity, it takes a willingness to challenge the status quo.
And that's where the film, in a way, falls short.
Okay.
It gives you this compelling emotional story,
Yeah.
but it misses the opportunity to tell a more nuanced, more impactful story
Mm.
about the collective fight that was happening alongside Ron Woodroo's personal journey.
It's like they took this complex historical event and tried to fit it into a neat little box.
Right.
A Hollywood box with a clear hero and villain.
Yeah.
But the reality of the AIDS crisis, like most social and political struggles, is far more complex than that.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
What other stories are being simplified or even erased in the name of entertainment or ideology?
Right.
Whose voices are we not hearing? Because they don't fit into that traditional hero narrative.
And that's why it's so important to engage with sources like this communist critique.
Yeah.
They challenge us to look beyond the surface, to question the narratives we're presented with, and to dig deeper into the complexities of history.
Speaking of digging deeper, the biographics video touched on something that really caught my attention.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The cut hunter theory about the origins of AIDS.
Ah, yes. That's a fascinating theory that challenges some of the common assumptions about the virus.
Right.
Essentially, it suggests that AIDS didn't originate in the United States, as many people believe,
Okay.
but likely jumped from primates to humans, possibly through hunting practices in Africa.
And that has huge implications, right?
Yeah.
It challenges this idea that AIDS was somehow a foreign disease brought to the U.S. It highlights the interconnectedness of global health and how viruses don't care about borders or nationalities.
Exactly. And it dismantles this narrative of blame that was prevalent in the early days of the epidemic.
Right.
Remember the whole patient zero myth?
Yeah.
The biographics video debunked that pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. The Canadian flight attendant who was wrongly accused of bringing AIDS to the U.S.
Right.
It's a prime example of how fear and prejudice can lead to scapegoating and misinformation.
And the communist critique connects this back to their broader argument about systemic forces.
Okay.
They argue that focusing on individual blame obscures the underlying causes of the crisis. Poverty, inequality,
Right.
lack of access to health care.
Right. It's like they're saying it's not about finding a single person to blame.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the complex social and economic conditions that created the environment for a crisis like this to emerge and spread.
It's a reminder that health isn't just about individual choices or behaviors.
Right.
It's deeply intertwined with social structures, power dynamics, and access to resources.
And that brings us back to the biographics video's closing message.
Okay.
Their call for knowledge, responsible behavior, and fighting stigma. They emphasize the importance of education and awareness in combating any health crisis.
It's a powerful message, and it ties into the communist critique's call for a more just and equitable healthcare system.
Right.
They argue that individual heroism isn't enough.
Yeah.
We need systemic change that prioritizes the well-being of all people.
And that resonates with the stories of those who fought for change during the AIDS crisis, doesn't it?
That does.
They understood that the fight was about more than just individual survival.
Right.
It was about social justice, about challenging inequality, about creating a better world for everyone.
Their legacy is a powerful reminder that collective action can make a difference.
Yeah.
They challenged the status quo, they demanded change, and they won important victories. And that spirit of activism and solidarity is just as important today as it was back then.
So we've gone from Hollywood heroes to grassroots activists, from individual struggles to systemic issues.
Right.
It's amazing how this one film, Dallas Buyers Club, has opened up such a wide-ranging conversation.
And that's the beauty of a deep dive, isn't it?
It is.
It's about taking a seemingly simple narrative and unraveling its complexities, uncovering the hidden layers of history, ideology, and human experience.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what's resonating most with you?
Okay.
What's standing out from this exploration of Dallas Buyers Club and the AIDS crisis? It's amazing how much ground we've covered.
I know, right?
Starting with this one movie.
Yeah, from Hollywood to healthcare systems to global pandemics.
And all because Dallas Buyers Club offered this compelling but ultimately limited view of a much bigger story.
Right, and that's where this communist critique really shines a light on things.
Okay.
They give the film a pretty harsh rating, actually.
Really?
Yeah, only 2 out of 5 hammers and sickles.
2 out of 5.
Yeah.
That's rough.
It is, but their reasoning makes sense. They argue that while the film exposes some of the flaws of the capitalist healthcare system, it ultimately reinforces the same system it critiques.
So they're kind of saying, nice try, Hollywood,
What?
but you're still playing by the rules of the game you're trying to expose.
Yeah, pretty much.
So how do they break that down?
Well, their main point is that Dallas Buyers Club promotes this myth of the individual savior.
Okay.
It suggests that with enough grit and determination, anyone can overcome systemic barriers.
But that's a dangerous oversimplification, right?
Exactly. It ignores the reality that real lasting change requires collective action, solidarity, and a willingness to challenge the very foundations of a system that prioritizes profit over people.
And that brings us back to those unsung heroes we talked about earlier.
Right.
Groups like ACPUP.
Exactly.
They understood that individual effort alone wasn't enough. They knew they had to organize and mobilize and fight for systemic change.
And they were willing to get uncomfortable to disrupt the status quo, to demand better from those in power. And they won some really significant victories because of it.
Victories that the film completely ignores.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's a crucial point.
It is.
By focusing solely on Ron Woodruff's individual journey,
Yeah.
the film misses the opportunity to showcase the power of collective action. The power of communities coming together to demand justice and equality. So it's not that the film is entirely bad. Right. It's just that it tells an incomplete story.
Exactly.
It focuses on the individual at the expense of the collective. And in doing so, it reinforces a capitalist narrative that ultimately benefits the very system it's supposed to be critiquing.
Precisely. And that's why this communist critique is so valuable. It encourages us to think critically about the narratives we consume, to question the stories we're told, and to seek out alternative perspectives.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
I went into this thinking Dallas Buyers Club was a straightforward story about one man's fight for survival.
Right.
Now I'm seeing it as a much more complex narrative, one that reflects larger societal issues and ideological battles.
And that's the power of critical analysis.
Yeah.
It allows us to see beyond the surface, to understand the deeper forces at play, and to engage with the world in a more informed and nuanced way.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that no single story can ever capture the full complexity of a historical event or a social movement.
Right.
There are always multiple perspectives, multiple narratives, and it's up to us to seek them out, to engage with them, and to form our own informed opinions.
So keep questioning, keep learning, and keep digging deeper.
Exactly.
There's a whole world of knowledge and insight out there waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Dallas Buyers Club and the AIDS crisis.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another thought-provoking exploration.
Thank you for listening to the Marxists at the Movies podcast. Don't forget to like and comment.
Where truths can grow. From shadows deep and screens ignite, the proletariat comes alive tonight. Marxists at the movies, bright and raw, breaking through the reels to rewrite the law. Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting